It's been a little bit since we played the games for the Nebula Hero Spotlight review, but we're finally here. Let's talk about Nebula. Hello and welcome to Nelson Oliver Cards. My name is Nelson and today we're going to do a deep dive into the Nebula Hero Kit. Now, it has been a little bit since we played Nebula. We got a couple of expansions, which kind of pushed back the timeline, and then I kind of maybe potentially, hypothetically, maybe forgot about the video for a little bit. Then it was the holidays, but we're here. It's fine. It is time to talk about Nebula. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be talking about her kit, the cards that come in her kit, some basic cards that work well for her kit, the cost curve of the kit, rank her in her aspects, so if she's best in one of them, and we're going to kind of talk about strategic advice for each one of the aspects, then put her in an overall ranking of Marvel Champions heroes. Now, this is primarily going to be a solo review, so one hero, only Nebula on the table, but at the end of the video, we're going to talk about a little bit of multiplayer thoughts there at the end. Now, there are going to be timestamps throughout the video, so if you want to jump to a specific spot, or come back and find a specific spot, hopefully those enable you to do so. So let's just dive in and talk about her alter ego. So Nebula's alter ego is Nebula, and she has a 6 hand size. She's a little squishy at 9 hit points and only 3 recovery. So we do have to take that into consideration when we are building for her, but because she's definitely on the less robust side of heroes. She does have a really nice response here called Cybernetic Upgrades, which states that after you play a technique upgrade, you get to draw 2 cards. This is great because her entire kit is based around 1 cost technique upgrades. So you play one and you are not out any resources. The 1 cost upgrade comes with that 2 effective costs. So the 1 cost plus the card itself. So you get to draw those 2 cards, which means you get to cycle your deck pretty quickly. Also in her alter ego, she has a card called Combat Ready, which is a really nice flexible card that allows you to either shuffle 2 technique upgrades from your discard pile back into your deck, or you can discard until you get a technique upgrade, put that into play, and then resolve its special ability. This is a nice way to get back some of the more impactful techniques, or if you built a deck around specific techniques, you're going to want to hit those very frequently, or it's going to be a nice way to get some tempo boost for getting those techniques in play and then applying the special ability. Now, what are techniques? So let's flip to her hero side and talk about them. Her hero card, just run through her stats real quick, is a 2-2-2-5, so 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense, 5 hand size. She has a forced response. It's called Combat Protocols. That states after your turn begins, you resolve the special of every single technique upgrade in play, and then you discard that technique upgrade. So this is a forced response, meaning that you are required to discard these technique upgrades after you resolve their special ability. So you can't keep them around or trigger them at the exact right time, which does take a lot of planning, and there is a nice little skill curve in learning, or learning curve I should say, in learning how to pilot Nebula effectively. Now let's dive in and talk about these technique upgrades, because her entire kit is built around them. She has 5 different technique upgrades in her kit. Each one of them has an ongoing benefit that I will never ever remember. I will never remember to trigger these, but these are so very good and you should definitely remember them. And then they have that special benefit that triggers at the start of Nebula's turn with her combat protocol abilities. Every single one of these is 1 cost, and then we're going to go through and talk about each one of them, starting with Cutthroat Ambition. We have 2 of these in her kit. The ongoing benefit is that her attacks gain piercing and overkill. The special ability here that you trigger at the start of your turn is to remove 3 threat from a scheme. This is probably my favorite one to build around, because summoning minions and then running big attacks with like overkill is one of my favorite play styles in the entire game. Now you can pretty much guarantee that you can have one of these on the table almost every single game with Combat Ready and Alter Ego. Then you're able to run these big events, these big high impact events, and hit minions with them with overkill. And then you run follow through. Again, probably not the best way to play an aggression build, but one of my favorite ways. So I really like this. Not many things in the game give overkill to different attacks. This is one of those things, and it can be really satisfying to play. The 3-threat forced response is pretty good, but it can be hard to trigger. If the main is clear when you're going into the villain phase, then you have to hit the main, and you're probably only going to have like one threat on that main in solo. But what I like now is that we have player side schemes, and player side schemes gave Nebula a fairly decent boost because 3-threat from a scheme is that threshold for the majority of our player side schemes in the game. So we can put the player side scheme out, not actively thwart it for that benefit, but know that once we are able to trigger this forced response, we can clear an entire side scheme. And then at that point, we can get the full utilization out of this 3-threat removal. Nebula is a big fan of these player side schemes. The next one that we're going to talk about is Weapons Master. The passive benefit for Weapons Master is Retaliate 1, and then the special that triggers at the beginning of her turn is 4 damage. Nice way to throw some damage at the villain or take out a beefy minion. May get lucky and get that overkill damage if Cutthroat Ambition is in play. But a lot of her like minion clearing kind of comes from this Weapon Master plus her 2 attack. So she has that nice flexible stat line. Weapon Master, it's kind of hard to have too much damage. So unlike Cutthroat Ambition, Weapon Master typically has a place to throw all of the damage that it can put out. The Retaliate 1, on the other hand, I don't really like to be taking a lot of hits with Nebula because what we talked about earlier, she is fairly squishy at the 9 health. 3 recoveries, so she doesn't want to be taking a lot of damage. So unless we're running like a super high and effective take no perfect defense, take no damage type protection build, the Retaliate 1 is usually lost because I'm chumping as much as I possibly can with Nebula. So Weapons Master kind of has a less benefit passive, but a more beneficial special ability. So kind of take what you want. And if you can get the Star Still line and get each one of them exactly when you need, it's pretty fun Marvel Champions. The next one that we're going to talk about is Wide Stance, and this kind of plays into the previous one about the Retaliate, and if we're running a build to reduce the amount of damage that we're taking, this one is a good one to run because the passive benefit on Wide Stance is that we get to reduce the amount of damage she takes from any attack by 1. This is really nice. You can tank minions, Ultron hates you. All of this kind of good stuff is really good with Wide Stance, but again, it's only out there for one villain phase typically. So yeah, it's nice when it lines up. Again, Nebula is one of those characters that I really enjoy when all the stars align and everything comes together perfectly. She is really fun to play. It's getting those stars to align, which is the most difficult part. So Wide Stance is a really interesting card. If you can trigger it off the Retaliate, if you can make sure that you're not dying when you take some of these damages, Wide Stance is a really fun one to play, especially because the special tells you to look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck. You can discard one of them and put the rest back in any order. So really cool card, get you out of some tough situations. Get rid of Advanced Glider, get rid of Advance, get rid of Shadows of the Past. Really, whatever you want to get rid of, you can. And then you can set your boost and your encounter card for the villain phase. So that's nice. It's really good tech. You can make sure that you know exactly how much you can tank. So if you know the villain is going to be hitting you for 5, maybe you have it set up so that you can mitigate a lot of that damage and you can trigger that Weapon Master Retaliate. Or if you had another copy of Wide Stance, so this one goes away at the beginning of your turn, which is when you get to look at the top couple cards, and then if you have another one that you can play, then you can mitigate the damage coming in. So there's a lot of really puzzly decisions that Nebula kind of revolves around. The next one that we're going to be talking about is Unyielding Persistence. This one is the card that got the biggest boost in Nebula's kit post 1.5 update, and let's talk about why. Because it gives Nebula +1 attack, +1 thwart, and stalwart, which are incredible passive benefits. The special here is that she gets a tough status card. Now if she already has a tough status card, there's no valid target for this card to give a tough status card to, and therefore it does not proc, it does not go away, it stays on the table, keeping those passive benefits in play. So +1 thwart, +1 attack, +1 or stalwart. And so if we're following the previous kind of strategy that I was talking about with chump blocking a lot and keeping that tough either for a very scary attack or a surprise attack or whatever, and you get to keep that tough, Unyielding Persistence never goes away, and you're looking at a 3/3/2 stat line. So now that was a nice little present for Nebula in this 1.5 update. So really happy with how Unyielding Persistence goes about. We only get one of these, but it is a really Another really fun card to build around. The last technique upgrade in her kit is called Evasive Maneuvering. The special here, I'm sorry, the passive benefit here is that she can ignore guard, crisis, and patrol keywords. And so she's able to effectively be like Shadowcat at home, right? So she's able to skirt around some of these nasty minions or side schemes in order to make sure that she can do what she needs to be doing. The special ability here is to either stun or confuse an enemy, which in Marvel Champions, especially in solo, is very, very effective. We really like Evasive Maneuvering. This is one of those that I'm probably targeting to put back into my deck using combat protocols because I want to confuse with Nebula. I want to be flipping down the alter ego very frequently with Nebula, which is one of the weaknesses, I think, in her kit. Because she only has this one confuse, now we can cycle this, we can hit this multiple deck passes. In solo, we really want to make sure that we can roll down safely, be effective on the flip back up so that we can hit the main scheme and not lose to a surprise advance or anything like that. So the confuse here is very, very powerful, and I'm definitely looking to shuffle this one back in. The next card that we're going to talk about is, I think, the saddest card. Or no, let's keep this positive. The next card that we're going to talk about is the card that I think gets the biggest boost from when you go to solo to multiplayer, because this is Lethal Intent. This is an X costed card that says you can trigger the special ability of X number of techniques in play. So if you pay for 2 for this card, you get to trigger 2 technique upgrades. What's nice is at multiplayer, you can call on actions, and before the start of your turn, you can trigger the special of your technique upgrades you have in play. So if you have a weapons master on the table, it's going to be 4 damage when it comes to you. Or heck, if you have 2 of them, it's going to be 8 damage when it comes to you. You're going to trigger weapon master. If you are not first player, if you are buddy over here who's playing Hulk, he's taking their turn, they can call on an action for you. You can play Lethal Intent, pay 2, trigger Weapon Master twice. They do not discard, and it passes to you and you can trigger it again. So Nebula goes from a tough solo player to a really fun and interesting and great teammate with this card. Her signature ally is Gamora. She is a 3-cost, 2/2/3 ally. It has a response. After you play Gamora, you get to choose a technique upgrade in play and resolve its special ability. Nice. Really great for all the previous mentioned interactions. So throw damage, remove threat, plus 3/2/2/3 is a very solid stat line. So we like Gamora. Nebula's ship is her resource generator. It's a 2-cost wild resource generator, which is great, especially because Nebula is a Guardian traded hero, and we don't have a lot of resource generators for Guardians that are not available to the rest of the heroes. So like we can run Helicarrier, we can run Avengers Mansion, but the Guardians don't have their Quentin Carrier. Nebula has her ship. We like resource generators here on this channel. Let's talk about her cost curve. Nebula has a phenomenal cost curve at 1.08 cost per card. One of the lowest, only 2 that are lower here are Drax and X-23. So we kind of talked about the benefits of a low cost curve in the previous video, the X-23 video, because you are able to either play a ton of cards, you're able to be uber flexible, reduce that cost curve even more, throw the 0 to 1 cost cards into the deck, and you're playing 3, 4, 5 cards per turn and being very flexible. Or because we already are starting with a base of a low cost curve, we can even out the cost curve. Similar to what we were talking about in our cost curve video that I did with Villain Theory, we can, instead of, usually in that example video, we were talking about adding lower cost cards in order to level out the cost curve. Since we have a low cost curve and our graph kind of slants down to the right, we can add high cost, high impact cards and raise the cost curve and flatten it out that way. And so now we have the flexibility in her own cards, but also we can throw the high impact, the high cost cards that are really going to have a nice modification on the game. Let's talk about some of the basic cards that we like to run. I do really like to run Ready to Rumble with her. I like to be flipping every single turn. I like Meditation with Nebula, especially if I'm running Ready to Rumble. If I'm exhausted in my alter ego state, I can flip back up Ready and then use that flexible stat line. Even better if it's a 3/3/2, if we've employed the rules and tricked the rules to our advantage. We talked about Confuse earlier, so Professor X is going in almost every single one of my solo decks, but especially in Nebula's deck, Professor X being able to confuse that villain, giving us a safe roll down is fantastic. The last thing that I want to talk about here in the basic section is the kind of the strength that the Guardians have as a tribe is the incredibly good basic allies that they can bring to the table. And so I'm looking to run all of the basic allies in this deck as well as Nowhere. And at that point, we're looking at a lot of basic cards. And so usually I'm looking at running a power in all of us because I'm running Helicarriers, Avengers Mansions, and kind of bringing that, basic package to the table, especially with all the Guardian allies that they have. Now, one thing I will say is that Gamora is probably the best of these basic Guardian allies, and we cannot run Gamora because Gamora is our signature ally, and that makes us sad. And yeah, but here we are. Gamora is still very, very good, but I miss the basic Gamora. All right, let's talk about our aspects. We're going to rank these in terms of least good in to best in, and we're going to start out with protection. So protection, she wants to be flipping a lot, and protection is really anti-synergistic with that type of strategy. She also doesn't necessarily want to be defending all by herself. Now, she does have a fairly fun, albeit not super great, perfect defense build where she can be defending a ton, using White Stance to reduce the damage, using Weapon Master to get the retaliate. So she has some synergy there, but we want to be chump blocking with her, and if we are running that perfect defense, then we don't get to go down and trigger her combat protocol abilities where she's going to be able to draw 2 cards each time she plays a technique upgrade, because then protection isn't doing what protection wants to do. So yeah. The other way that I kind of have enjoyed playing protection is the always ready protection, especially once we have that lethal intent and we have the +1/+1, so we're swinging for like 3 or thwarting for 3. Protection can be very flexible in that sense when we just run a ton of basic activations. In third place, we have Aggression. Aggression is a lot of fun because of her cost curve and kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you can bring those high impact cards to the table and be okay from a cost curve perspective, and that looks like Hone Technique. Hone Technique is so much fun in Nebula, especially because she gets overkill if she has her Cutthroat Ambition card on the table, and so now a Hone Technique melee is doing 6 and 6 plus overkill if you have follow through. Again, it's kind of slow. It may not be the most effective thing in the table, but a 6/6 with 3 follow throughs is throwing, if you're attacking, I don't know, let's say 2-3 health minions. Now we're pushing 12 damage to the villain, and that's just a ton of fun. I love it. And so Aggression is in third place. It's my favorite way to play her because I really like overkill. I don't know what it is about overkill. Overkill's fun. Second place, we're going to talk about Leadership. She is a Guardian, so she has access to Welcome Aboard. We're bringing that Guardian package, but then also we can bring any of our blue friends as well. Leadership is the aspect that's going to allow you to put the most allies on the table and therefore have those answers to block that villain activation and protect our fragility that is Nebula. So Leadership in second place, get a lot of allies onto the table, use Nowhere, throw Guardians, have fun. That means in our first place, and the best aspect for Nebula in solo play is Justice, and I'm not sure if this was a surprise to many people, but it does help facilitate her flipping. Justice is the thwarting aspect. It's the one that brings the most ability to confuse to the table, and so now we can continuously confuse lock that villain, and we can flip every single turn, triggering drawing cards, triggering combat protocols, triggering cybernetic upgrades, and just having a good time. We can focus on damage with Weapon Master once we have that 3 attack. We can focus our basic activations over there on the villain. Justice is a lot of fun. I like Aggression a little bit more, but I do like Justice, and I like the ability to flip every single time. Now, we don't have a great reason to run Float Like a Butterfly, other than the fact that this is someone who we do want to be confused locking with. Increasing that damage by 1 whenever we're attacking a confused enemy is very nice, especially if we're running in tandem like kind of an army. If we're running a ton of chump blockers, we're running a lot of low-cost allies, we can throw a Float Like a Butterfly at the villain. It's not necessarily needed, but it is just kind of there's a correlation there, right? Like Nebula wants to be confusing, and so whenever we have a hero that always wants the villain to be confused, Float's a pretty good idea there. Alrighty, let's talk about the overall rank of Nebula. When I put this out a while ago on the community tab on YouTube, the community ranked and had Justice as their top, and they were kind of close and tied with everything else. In their ranking, they also had her ranked as a B tier overall, and I actually, this is how old this, I did these videos. I recorded and did all of these videos pre a new tier list. So I did a new ranking of every Marvel Champions hero, put them in a power list, kind of redistributed them, and I did the video after I played all the games with Nebula, and before this video, it was supposed to be like, you know, the games, rank, this video, kind of like really close. Now we're a little bit after that, but during that video, I had her at a C tier, and I'm still comfortable with that. So we're going to just keep her there at a C tier. I really do enjoy Nebula. She's not the strongest hero in the game, but she is a really fun puzzle. I think that bringing her, trying to figure out exactly how and when to put your techniques into play, trigger and get the most optimal benefit out of each one of those techniques when you are forced to trigger their special ability is a really interesting and fun thing to try and figure out. Bringing player side schemes to the game really kind of helped her with some of her over thwarting that she kind of had as a issue previous to those player side schemes in true solo. Now in like multiplayer, kind of hard to have too much thwarting. You obviously can, but especially in solo, those cutthroat ambitions were being lost. The efficiency of those were being lost a good bit. Now, if we have those, we have the player side schemes, we can set them up so that we can clear a player side scheme. Now we're feeling really, really good. It can be punishing if you want to flip very frequently. Now, we do have a lot more confused in the game than when she was initially released. And so I do think that Nebula has grown in power since the initial release of her hero kit, because we have cards like Psylocke and Aggression, Professor X and Basic. We have a couple of ways to induce statuses that help her and facilitate her flipping. Plus the rules 1.5 upgrade helped some of her techniques, so unyielding persistence is on the table if we never lose that tough status card. And so that rules 1.5 update did do a lot to help Nebula. So really, really happy with that. I really enjoy these hero spotlights because I like being able to bring heroes to the table that I don't always see myself gravitating towards. I don't go and pick out Nebula as a hero that I want to play, but when I do play her, I do have a lot of fun with her. Let's talk about multiplayer real quick. She is significantly more fun in multiplayer. We already kind of talked about lethal intent, but because you can call on actions and you can trigger your special abilities on the technique upgrades you have in play via lethal intent on your ally's turn, that gets epic, because now you don't have to have all the stars line up. If you have just some of the stars line up and you have Weapon Master and Cutthroat Ambition on the table, it's not your turn yet. You can call on that action. Lethal Intent can go off and you have a full hand to help pay for Lethal Intent. So honestly, if you have like 4 technique upgrades in play, you have a hand size of 5, if you just dump your hand into Lethal Intent and trigger the upgrades and then trigger them again on your turn, that's not awful. That's not a bad strategy to have. Also, that overkill build gets way better in multiplayer, and so I think I'm a little biased towards that as well, just because I like having minions that I can kill. Yeah. Ooh. So that was Nebula. Thank you all so very much for hanging out and being patient. I know I have Vision coming up next, so I'm going to be working on the Vision Hero Spotlight then, and then we're going to be going back and we'll get in a Hero Spotlight or 2 before AOA. The Age of Apocalypse comes out, and so I'm really looking forward to that drop, and yeah, really fun stuff. Glad to have finally got talking about Nebula. Tell me what you think about her. Do you like her? Are you okay with that forced response? Do you ever have trouble figuring out how to trigger and optimize the efficiency of Nebula? Let me know. Awesome. Appreciate y'all. I'll see you around. Peace.